for being here. Today we're joined by Anna Reh-Gingerich, I hope that I pronounced that correctly, from the City of Wilmington Stormwater Services Department, and she works as the watershed coordinator there. And we're super excited to have you. So if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about your position and kind of how you got there and what you do in that position, that would be awesome.
Sure, and you did an awesome job with the name pronunciation. Thank you so much for that. It doesn't happen very often. Yeah, so I currently work as the watershed coordinator for the City of Wilmington Stormwater Services Department. A large portion of my job is focused on implementing the Bradley and Hewlett's Creek watershed restoration plan. And that plan is focused on reducing or soaking in as much stormwater as possible within both of those watersheds to try to improve water quality down the line. So it's a lot of coordinating with local stakeholders, interacting with the public, doing social media work, doing stuff on the website, and it it varies day to day, but that's kind of a brief overview.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So I guess to head into our first question, could you expand a little bit on what your journey in sustainability has been like and what led you to your current position?
Sure. You don't have a time limit on these, do you? Okay.
Take all the time that you need.
All right. Yeah, it's hard to condense it into like a short story. But my background is really heavily focused in like water quality and stormwater runoff. So I know sustainability is like a huge topic that has lots of various subtopics. So, I can really mainly only speak to the stormwater side of things, but just know that there are other opportunities within the city to, you know, or just any government role to look at other sustainability topics. But as far as stormwater goes, I learned really early on when I was young that I was not cut out to be a vet after watching many episodes of Emergency Vet on Animal Planet back in the day. So I loved animals and I love nature. So I tried to kind of find areas that were really interesting to me. And I grew up in Michigan actually. And so, the Great Lakes, they're called lakes, but they're not really lakes. They're much bigger than lakes. So while I was out there, I really liked, kind of like its own coastal ecosystem. And I loved going out to the water and playing by the beach. And I loved, checking out all of the cool fish and other critters that you can find out there. So I I knew that I wanted to work with water, but I was really, really, really amazed by the ocean when we went on a vacation to Florida when I was very young. So that's kind of where I turned my attention to. And so I went to school at Michigan State University, and I got an undergraduate in zoology with a concentration in marine biology because I thought I wanted to be a marine biologist. Um, and, while I was in that program, I had an opportunity to work as an undergraduate research student or assistant, sorry. And in that role, I helped out in a stickleback fish lab and, maintaining the tanks and doing research. But it also really kind of opened my eyes to the world that is academia. And I I wasn't sure that I really enjoyed the idea of being in school for the next 10 years of my life. So I wanted to do something that was more hands-on. So I actually took a gap year to kind of try to figure out what that was. Um, it was there was a lot of figuring out what I don't want to do. But then I came across this program at UNCW, actually, the Masters in Coastal and Ocean Policy program. And it was relatively new, but I really liked it because it combined, the hard sciences with science outreach and communication. And that was something that was really important to me when I was an undergrad. We're doing all of this great research, but no one's ever talking about it. Or they're talking about it amongst themselves and not sharing the great work with, people outside of their circles. So I really like that this program was all about, taking the hard science and translating it into ways that can be used in policy, or for, government ordinances, working with the public to kind of achieve the goals that the research set out to do. So, that I really enjoyed that program there. And while I was there, I got an internship here at Stormwater Services as an education and outreach intern. And I kind of started building my circle. And, I knew that it was different from being, focusing solely on marine wildlife, but I was really interested in the way that, we can influence what people do on the land to help that marine wildlife down the line. So my focus kind of shifted, again, finding things that, you don't want to do to find what you really want to do. And, to be totally honest with you, I never would have seen myself going into stormwater runoff when I was that kid playing on the beach. But I'm actually really happy that I ended up where I am because I feel like I can make positive changes to help those ecosystems that I care about. So that was kind of a very long-winded introduction to that. But yeah, that's how I ended up here. And there are lots of hurdles and bumps along the way, but I can save that for other questions.
I loved your answer to that, and I feel like I always love hearing people's answers to that question because I think there's a lot of overlap in people being like, I never really imagined I'd be here, but here I am, and I had to figure out all these other things to get to where I am. So I like that a lot. You touched on that you were an intern in the beginning with the group you're with now. So what was it that drew you to the stormwater management? Like, so when you did begin as an intern, and kind of how did that begin?
Well, for me, it was kind of right timing, right place. Like I had touched on before, science outreach was a really big piece of what motivated me when I was an undergraduate student. I used to do this, or I participated in this group called Science Theater, where we actually did presentations for school kids from kindergarten all the way to high school, and some of them were very theatrical with exploding elephant toothpaste and lighting gummy bears on fire, to more hands-on things where I kind of tried to work in more biology type activities, like to talk about evolution and ecosystem services and things like that. So I really wanted to do something that involved that educational and outreach component. So when I was in grad school, get to know your teachers because your teachers will help you, find those positions that are out there. And, they're on a lot of listservs and things where job openings come through because Dr. Mike Mallon actually sent out an email. It's like, hey, they're looking for a stormwater, an intern for stormwater services doing these Enviroscape presentations where we have a watershed model, and you work with eighth grade students to kind of talk to them about water quality issues and things like that. So it stuck out at me, and I was like, okay, yeah, that's what I want to do. And by having that one connection, I was able to get into the position and really like the position. But then there was just so much more that I learned once I was in the position. talk about stormwater regulations. And, I thought papers in class were long. You start reading stormwater ordinances and you're like, oh my God, this is huge. Um, it was really fun, creating educational displays to communicate that science that I was learning in school, um, to people or to the public and to students, that directly related to what I was doing in my position. So it was, again, kind of a right time, right place, right skill set. But I really enjoyed what I was learning while I was here. And it actually motivated me to, build my capstone research project, around stormwater and stormwater regulations, which then helped me get my next position, um, with the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality as a total maximum daily load coordinator. And I really enjoyed that position as well. But there were more, there was a little less flexibility because it was such a regulatory agency. So again, it was kind of finding those things that, oh, well, maybe this doesn't quite totally jive with me. So when this position came open and I saw that it was, again, working more kind of with an educational component and doing more, on the ground, hands-on work, I was like, yes, that's what I want to do. So that's how I ended up back here.
We love our Enviroscape here, so I always love when people talk about it because it's such a fun activity.
It is.
But I guess oh my gosh, sorry, tripping on my words. You provided a really good segue into our next question. But based on the skills that you learned both in your undergrad degree and your graduate degree, what do you think you use most in your career now, whether it be like technical skills or information, or what like really prepared you within your education?
Yeah, I was thinking about that earlier because it felt like, the classes that I took, there was all this research that you constantly had to do. It was like paper after paper after paper. And, I'm sure you guys are feeling it in the thick of finals right now. Like, oh my God, I just never want to read again because I'm doing so much reading right now. But that is actually one of the biggest skills that you're going to use, moving forward, because that's basically all I do. Well, not all I do, but a lot of what I do now is research and, reading what the latest, stormwater technologies are, and uh, looking at information about what's going on in, the Briley Creek and Hewlett's Creek drainage areas. What kind of demographic information is there? What is information is there about constructed wetlands? It's just a lot of research. So really kind of take to heart, um, the strategies that you use and the databases that you use, because, once you're, no longer a student, your access becomes a little more limited. So if you just kind of start to pay attention to where those research papers are coming from that you might be interested in using more of in the future, that can really help you in your future positions. So take research very seriously because you're going to keep doing it. Um, a, Another thing is I also recommend at least one GIS course. I do, manage a database that, we have a GIS map where we track all of our projects, and, it has, all the contact information and the amount of, stormwater runoff that's being absorbed and, treated, and as well as, just building general maps to use in educational components as well. We do have a dedicated GIS department here, but it helps, to already kind of have some of those skills of your own so that you can do some of those projects on your own as well, and just be able to interpret those maps and kind of know the basics of how to put them together or how they work. So I do use GIS, policy review and analysis. If you're ever going to be proposing something, I've had to create a couple proposals here, and trying to kind of develop a program, or a specific, um, like a program within a program, like another way to implement the watershed restoration plan. Being able to, do the research and figure out what all the pieces are that are going to go into that program. You may need to do a cost benefit analysis. That's something that I've looked at as well. Look at cost efficiencies of, why maybe we would recommend one practice over another. So there's a lot of just reviewing policy and also developing policy that I do now, a little more so than I thought I would be doing. I will say that. But if you're going to go into a government related position, basically expect to be reviewing policies. Um, and then also, just general grammar and writing. I think that's one of the biggest things that you kind of take for granted after a little while. But if you can write strong reports, I am writing something every single day. And you're going to have people reviewing the work that you do. And so the more skills that you have related to writing and grammar, the farther you can go, or the further, I should say, you can go in your position. Because I can't stress enough how important it is to keep up your writing skills.
Well, that is all great news to hear, because I feel like I'm always writing and always working on reports and things like that. So good.
You're doing it for
to
a
know that'll
reason.
be kept up in the future. And you kind of touched on this next question a little bit, and kind of saying that you were a little bit surprised with how much policy and some of the things. So what are some of the skills that you don't feel you were really as prepared for from class, that you maybe had to learn or brush up on or improve upon, as you entered this position and as you've learned the position?
Sure. So yeah, I mean, the policy analysis courses that I took during school were kind of more general and broad in nature. So being in stormwater services, I really needed to get familiar with the Clean Water Act and the history of how the EPA was developed, and how various environmental regulatory agencies are now um, put in place below them at the state level, and how the state influences what goes on at the local level. And there are just so many layers of ordinances, that I feel like you would have to have an entire program, just about stormwater ordinances to really get into the full nitty gritty of it. But if you're interested in anything stormwater related, I would recommend at least looking into it a little bit, just so that you're familiar with the hierarchy. And also, there are stormwater regulations that regularly go to the state legislature that are reviewed and modified. So it's also very much a changing landscape, depending on what's going on in the government as well. So that was definitely a deep dive that I had to take right when I started, but it was definitely worth it. There was also more kind of hard labor involved in my position. When we put in practices, they need to be maintained, and you need to be able to understand how to maintain them as well. So there are like certification programs that you can take through the state, but they're usually only available after you've already gotten into the stormwater field. So that was something that was like, okay, well, I didn't take any classes on this, but I was able to kind of learn it while being in the field, and working on them actively. So if you ever see an opportunity to take a field course or just an internship in, helping with maintaining, whatever area of sustainability you're interested in, to get to know the actual pieces of what you're going to be implementing a little bit more, I would recommend that as well. And then safety and OSHA trainings, they don't really teach that in school, but that is a huge part of my position. So it's, safety is a part of every day while you're out on the job, because anything could happen. So being prepared and ready to address any situation that you could potentially encounter is a very important piece that they don't really tell you while you're in class, but they definitely tell you that when the first day that you start. So those are some kind of general pieces that um, I've have definitely been more kind of learning on the fly.
You keep just leading us right into the next question. I don't know if that was planned, but it was so perfect. So, kind of reflecting on the skills you had, the skills you didn't have, and your career in general. Going back in time, what do you think is one or two pieces of advice you wish someone had told you before entering, your current position or just the field that you're in general?
Um, I have a couple of pieces of advice, and I think they're a little more general career related pieces of advice, but they helped me get to where I am today. And one of them is that, it's really okay to figure out what you don't enjoy, um, because you'll eventually find things that you do enjoy. And, like I said earlier, I didn't expect to go from heavy research-based science path to this kind of more hands-on government position. I always saw myself as a marine biologist going forward, but um, I figured out that that wasn't really for me, and it is for some people, and that's great. But that was a really big learning point in my background that I felt a little conflicted about, because I felt like everyone had these expectations of me. But you don't have to live up, or do what other people expect of you. You should do what feels good to you, and what interests you, and what you think would make you happy, because it's your life. Um, and, and kind of along that same line, just kind of keep a lookout for opportunities in unexpected places. Um, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but getting to know your teachers or your classmates, or going out and doing events with local groups can really help you start to build a network, um, where you can find those opportunities and be the right person at the right time at the right place. Because that's kind of been my life story to this point, but it's definitely been enjoyable and worth it. So just kind of keep your mind open, and try new things.
I love both of those pieces of advice. And also, I feel like you've just sprinkled in wisdom throughout. So I appreciate that. And I think it's more people need to hear things like you don't have to pick like right away. You can kind of survey the fields and see what you like. Because as someone who changed my major a year and a half into college, could have used some of that talk earlier on, like, hey, that's okay if you want to change. Like,
Yeah,
you don't need to stick with it. So I appreciate that. um, but
absolutely.
going into our last question, and I think you probably have some answers for this, saying that based on that you were an intern with this group, are there ways that UNCW students can get involved, and what opportunities do y'all have available, whether that be learning, volunteering, really anything?
Yeah. So the city as a whole pretty frequently posts internship opportunities. If you go to the city of Wilmington, or wilmingtonnc.gov, on our homepage, there's I think it's on the right top corner, there's a tab that says jobs, and I would recommend hopping on there, every couple months or so just to see if anything new has been posted. I can say that right now they are hiring for a fire department GIS intern, which I know, may be different from, what this group is interested in. But like I said, if you keep your opportunities open, it could be a great way to get some GIS skills under your belt and, actively practice using that system. Oh, yes, thank you. They're also hiring for a lead hazard reduction program intern, which closes today. So if that is something that sounds groovy to you, I would definitely recommend hopping on there right after this, and going through that application process, um, and throw your name in the hat. So that's one way, or the best way probably, to see opportunities that the city has available. Just kind of in general, stormwater related. There are some rain gardens that you guys have on campus now. It never hurts to talk to local experts like your sustainability officer, Ms. Cap Holman, to see if there are any ways that you can maybe either help maintain those gardens, or um, just learn more about them. The more that you can learn now, the more it'll help you down the line. Let's see. We also, if you want to get your hands wet with reviewing policy, the City of Wilmington's Land Development Code is being updated, and it is currently open for comments. So that could be a good way just to see, what all goes into, looking at the entire city as a whole, and you know, practicing participating in that public participation process, because that is also a big part of what we do, is interacting with the public. And the more feedback that you can give us, the better we can serve you. So those are a couple of kind of initial thoughts as to how you guys can be involved. Um, you're also always welcome to reach out to me if I know of anything. I'll be happy to send it your way. Stormwater Services itself doesn't have any openings right now, but again, keeping up with that jobs tab on the city's website would be a great way to be able to jump on anything that pops up.
Thank you so much. I know I will definitely be keeping my eye on that webpage. But as Annie mentioned, this is actually our last prepared question in our PowerPoint.